Okie dokie. Welcome everyone to your Future Leaders today. And I think we're on episode 68. I think we're on 68, although last time I said 69, but it was 67. So one of these days we'll be up to scratch before we begin. I'm pretty confident it is 68. If not, it is the 6th of July. We can work it out afterwards. So we've got a smaller crew today. We've been off for about 3 weeks. Feels like ages, which in the crypto space, 1 week is about a month at least. No, sorry, 1 day is about a month. So I would say three weeks is like a good year and a bit in the crypto world. So we've got a lot to catch up on, all sorts to do, but we're going to keep this kind of gentle and a bit of a round robin because there's no solid theme, although regulation has been a big thing that's been coming up in the last couple of weeks, it would seem. But we have one new person with us today, and as ever on Future Leaders, when we have a new person, we just have a good 30 to 60 seconds to get a bit of an insight into where you are at on your crypto journey, just so we can kind of gauge, I suppose, experience and just understanding where things are currently at. And also the question we ask everyone that joins, and this is the same for everyone else actually, is what is the one piece of information you'd love to have that would help you to move forward? So wherever you are in your crypto journey, there's normally something that's stopping you going on to the next step. So we just want to get a bit of a gauge on that, Orlo. If you can share, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I'm going to step inside to start the rain. I just got into crypto, actually, after I met you. When was that? Starting in January. Really research in January, and it wasn't until last month that I started buying. So I'm lucky in that I'm buying the dip, so to speak, here. I am pretty much half of my assets currently in crypto, in Bitcoin, ETH, Cardano, and a little in some other little tiny coins. And that's where I'm at. So right now I'm still feeling out what the world, I'm still learning every single day, learning how crypto interacts with the rest of the world. And so I don't have any specific questions right now. I'm pretty much in as far as I think I need to be. So now I'm really just kind of sitting back and watching and learning as much as I can. That's it for right now.
Cool. Okay. What were the 4 or 5 coins you said you put them in? BTC, ETH, ADA, Cardano.
Yeah, Stella. I have a little bit of Stella and Monero.
Monero. In fact, we'll bring Monero into the conversation as well later on. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Orlo. Thanks for joining us as well. So I'm going to come around to everyone just for a 30-second to see if there's a point you'd love to understand to move forward. Omar, I know you said you wanted to understand a bit more about liquidity pools. Louise, you wanted to have a bit more of an insight into open discussion about the predictions for the future, but I'll still come around to see if there's anything else. I just saw that Justin joined us, and he's just walked off. I don't know if he's going to come back. Can you hear us, Justin?
Yep, I can hear you.
Cool. So whenever we have new people join us, Justin, we always just ask if you're happy to share for just 30 seconds where you're at on your crypto journey, if anywhere. And then wherever that is, what would be the one piece of information you'd love to understand so that you could leave this call being able to move forward a little bit more? So if you're happy to just share for 30, 60 seconds, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Justin. I'm a entrepreneur. Started a fitness business 12 years ago, doing 7 figures a year in revenue. So I've done a lot in the traditional brick and mortar space, and I've also had a lot of experience with traditional investing, and I understand how to value companies and things like that. I have very little knowledge when it comes to crypto. I'm just starting to learn now. So this is just part of the learning process for me, but I'd like to get more involved. My biggest question really is I don't really understand the underlying creation of value and services that allows money to be, that allows for the returns. And I understand that due to the newness of the industry and the expanding amount of capital going into it, that could be a portion of the equation, but it would just be helpful for me to understand a little bit how value gets created within crypto. Since in some of these cases, I don't like totally understand what the underlying business is.
Okay, and because of the, I met Justin the other day. He's really hospitable for us during a time of need, and we had a conversation, Justin, just about some different systems, the ones that kind of pay you a return, and there's value created in those. But then also, do you want to separate that question out to understand, like, how on earth does crypto in general, like the generic term, how is value even created in that? Because they're two different value creation sets. Yeah.
Yeah, I think starting with kind of on a general level, it would help me to kind of understand that a little bit better and feel a little bit more confident as I start to explore some of these options. And then I know each type of thing has its own, set of systems which may differ from between opportunities. So I'm aware of that. And so as we get into specific ones, that'd be interesting to know too. But yeah, I think just starting at a higher general level would be super useful.
Cool. Okay, no worries. Okay, so I'm going to come around to everyone in a second. Just a quick, well, I'll just see if Jerry, Louise, Elena, Omar, or Alan have any other questions. If you do, just kind of pop it in the chat and I'll come to you in a second. But we started Future Leaders to kind of, we really saw an opportunity that this is one of the greatest transferences of wealth we've ever seen. Having a brand new asset class get created is beyond rare. I mean, stocks were the last asset class that got created, and that's what, by and large, 100 years ago or so. So you're looking at a very new precedent being set, and not only being set in terms of a new asset class, but being set in terms of the fact that us, human, normal people that are not necessarily part of the back end of traditional finance, have the same opportunity to be involved in the asset class as someone with $100 million. Whereas traditionally, in traditional finance, the amount of money you put on the table really does unlock different doors of returns and different doors of possibility. But that's not the case in crypto. We are a much more decentralized, flat hierarchy when it comes to opportunity, when it comes to what is possible. Like tomorrow, any one of you can go and make your own crypto coin. Whereas you couldn't do that with things in traditional finance. To make traditional finance packages, you had to have the instruments, the tools, the money, the connections. And this is one of the big differences between traditional finance and decentralized finance and crypto. So Future Leaders today for us is a stepping stone. It's a bridge for people to move from not having a clue to being able to know how to swim out in the water with your own knowledge, with your own information in a safe space. And that's the community we look to keep within the Telegram group as well. So before we fully dive into everything, let's have a look. Elaine, if you log out of Zoom, just fully, sign yourself back out and come back in. You probably have it sorted. I've had it a few times like that. Jerry, are you all good for anything specific, or do you want to drop anything in that you'd love to have discussed during this call?
I think generally I'm okay. For a guy that went to art school, most of my focus is in like the banker type money exchanging coins, like XRP and XLM and XDC and Algo and stuff like that. Recently, I've, kind of gotten hip to the ISO group, even though I've been collecting these things. The ISO 20022 is, something that all the banks are going to use to communicate with each other. So, the fact that people call XRP the banker's coin, to me just is a little bit of a chuckle, because it just shows to me that they may not understand it. As an intermediary settlement tool and, cross between different currencies. So I think a lot of what I come here for is more community and just to see what happens to come to the surface. Because what I'm trying to learn is, well, you mentioned liquidity pools. I want to use some of those tokens on the Flare network As a big XRP holder, I got a lot of spark out of the deal, like a lot. So I want to figure out how to use it and utilize it, and use the Flare network. Basically, it's I think it's a behemoth, and if I play my cards right, I might be able to make a decent yearly income just off of the Flare network.
Just off that. Well, let's hold that, because some of the stuff that I'd love to actually ask you about answers Justin's questions, which is about underlying value, especially when we start bringing in ISL 2022.
Well,
because
utility, right?
Pardon?
The value becomes the utility in that case.
Exactly. Yeah, completely. But I want to hold on that for now. I just want to make sure we're capturing where everyone's at. Although I'm good with yourself, you're just kind of just moving forward and just absorbing at the minute. Is that right? You're in a little bit, and now you're just expanding. Cool. Louise, besides understanding about future predictions, where we're going, things like that, is there anything else that you'd just love to throw into the mix for us to try and cover on this call?
I think for me, I just kind of come for the knowledge. I don't really come with a lot of questions, because you don't know what you don't know. I always take a lot away, but don't. I think the reason I got into crypto in the first place, I suppose, like starting with why, is because I do think it's massively going to increase. But since I've bought it, it's just seemed to have gone down, which is why I'm kind of keen to find out about not necessarily the long-term future. I know it'll go up in the long run, but just your predictions, people who've been investing much longer, just for the next couple of months or so. But I think the NFT side really interests me, and I get the general gist of what the NFTs are used for. I think that might take off in years to come, but I don't really know how I invest in that now. I don't know if there's any coins that are specific to that or whatever, I'm not sure. And then generating cash flow, I think I've seen a couple of posts in Telegram about, like, I've just got my money sat in Binance, for example, and I think I'd much rather have it working for me and potentially earning a cash flow from it. That's something that I'm kind of pretty keen to learn a lot more about, and recommendations of where to put that, really.
Perfect. No, these are all good, really valid questions as well. And I think at some point when you're on your crypto journey, you just start asking different questions, but you can't ask those questions until you've had the other ones answered. And each level provides stability, but then provides a layer of like, oh, well, what's that? So these are all really, really good. Okay, cool. Elaine's struggling with audio and video and stuff. So Elaine, if you've got any questions or anything, just pop it on the chat. I think Alan's good at the minute. I've messaged him as well. Omar, anything else for yourself? I know you're asking about liquidity pools. Is there anything else you'd love to add, comment, or bring into the discussion if you're on audio? If you're not, just message. And if you're not there, I'll move on in a minute. Going once, twice. Okie dokie. Oh, there we go. No, just looking to about liquidity pools. Okay, so we've got a few newbie sides of things. We've got, I want to bring in some of the stuff Jerry talked about with ISO stuff. Ricardo, before we go in as well, was there anything in particular you wanted to make sure we throw into here? I know we have different views on things, so I want to make sure that we're covering all that as well. Are we happy with what we're uncovering so far?
I think there's quite a bit to sort of cover there. We have mentioned, you mentioned at the start about covering perhaps regulations coming in and just things to be aware of around that as well, because there are choices to be made for people in terms of, where to engage with crypto, how much to engage, and whether to engage with it or not, basically, in terms of privacy and things like that. And also just from the point of view of, I think we've talked about it before in the last call, the sort of spread in terms of having lots of options in front of you, knowing what your plan is for the future in terms of this next sort of 6 to 12 months, I guess, and planning sort of a funnel or different ways of exiting based on your own plans, basically. So, and that's different for everybody, of course, but I think we need to touch on that because it's ramping up clearly, the regulation side of things. So
cool. Well, what I've done is I've grouped it into three parts to the call. Then if we cover, first of all, about value, because I think it's really good, and this is really good for everyone, to just go back to basics, like, because you can get caught up in this really, most people that get into crypto very quickly get wrapped up in it all. And so it's good to go back to basics, like, why on earth are we even in it? Like, how is this making a difference? Some people are running it for money. Some people are in it because it's making a difference in the world. But like, because value is a very, it's a very subjective term. But normally people are referring to monetary purposes. But if we want to understand, like, where's this value coming from within crypto? Then if we can move on to regulation, because we can also cover within that this potential winter that we're moving into, this potential bear market where it's going to be lower for a period of time. Because then we can move into, well, how do you prepare for that winter, which is moving into interest earning, which kind of comes back to Justin's question initially about value. At the same time, it also includes liquidity pools, which Omar wants to talk about, and it covers Louise's question, which is around, I've got my money sat in Binance. How do I make that money make me more money? How do I make that crypto work for itself? And then we cover those. I think that's everything. The only last one is something Neil asked, which is about gas fees. Where's the best place to withdraw it to custody free? I might cover that on another call, custody free wallets and fees, just because it's very different. But if we get a chance, let's see if we can bring it in. So that's the structure we're going to have it. It's 11:20. We want 10 minutes afterwards. We've got a good 20 minutes on each one, roughly speaking. So I think let's begin with value. And I'm going to limit this just so we really cover it to what is the actual value of crypto? Why on earth is anybody, forget us, but why is JP Morgan, why are BNY Mellon's, why are all these large institutions, BlackRock, coming into the crypto space? For what reason? Because if they're all making money on it, there's also reasons within which that they see it. So I'll share a little bit. I'll get a little bit off Richard and a little bit off Jerry, if Jerry's okay with that as well, because I'd love, Jerry, for yourself to just share a little bit from that ISO 2022 point of view. Like, because if you look at XRPs particularly in terms of how it's delivering value, it's pretty substantial, the problem it's solving. Because for me, whenever you're in business and you're looking at things, the size of the problem is equal to the size of the opportunity and the reward. The bigger the problem you're solving, the harder it is to solve, but the higher rewards you're going to get for that. And I think the main points that I would cover around crypto, and for Justin's point of view, Justin, I want to separate the words crypto from the words blockchain. You familiar with the word blockchain? Just thumbs up, down, whatever. Yeah, you are. Okay, cool. So I usually refer to the fact that blockchain is the big name, and then from blockchain you get crypto, just like you've got the internet and you've got emails, websites, file transfer services, telephone calls. These are all services that come from the internet. Well, cryptocurrency as a token is one use of a blockchain, and people derive value to that. But blockchain is the big word. And the big thing what blockchain allows us to do is to be decentralized as opposed to centralized, and allows for us to have, they use the word trustless, which I think sometimes can be a bit misleading, but it refers to the fact that no middleman is needed. And initially you might think, well, who cares about that? But so much of the world's infrastructure works on the fact that there's a middleman. So I want to do a deal with Jerry. I don't know who Jerry is, but Jerry's going to sell me this nice cup of coffee. There's a moment where I have to let go of the money, and Jerry has to give me the cup. And if I trust Jerry, I say, okay, Jerry, I sent you $10. Jerry says, cool, I'll put this in the post. But when you start moving up to tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, people don't do that. We use someone like Richard. And I say, Richard, here's my cup. Jerry gives Richard the money. Richard exchanges them. We're both happy, and Richard takes a cut for that. When you're in crypto, or when you're using a blockchain, none of Richard's not needed. I can do a deal directly with Jerry, and without getting into it, and you're just gonna have to blindly accept this at this stage, but I have full trust because he's on a blockchain and he's signing for it himself, and I am for me, that the minute we both enter into a deal and we make a deal for a cup of coffee for $10 and I sign it and he signs it, it's done. It can't be, anything can be hacked. So I just want to use my words carefully, but without getting too far into it, it's verifiable and it's trustless in the sense that he can't run off with it. So you start to think about the amount of industries that require middlemen, from banking with what they called intermediary banks, where 3 banks, this bank doesn't talk to this bank, but they both talk to bank B. You've got the buying of houses, the exchanging of any asset. You've got custody of things where people want someone to look after something. There's so many industries that require middlemen, and these middlemen make a lot of money and take a lot of cut, that when the price of the item gets smaller and smaller, there isn't a middleman because it's not worth it. And banks are a perfect example like that. And I'd rather Jerry talk about that, but I can't send 10 cents to a person in India. There's just too much friction in the industry that by the time it gets to the person, there's more than 10 cents been taken out in fees. So when we talk about value derived, I think the problem is most people can't see the problem because we think we live in a world that's just working, but it's working because of tons of micro industries that are almost not micromanaging, but keeping it going. It's not an efficient system because it uses so many excess points to keep going. So that's my first bit I want to share about value. Richard, I'd love whatever perspective or angle you want to share on it. Like, the question is fundamentally, how does crypto have any value at all? What determines it?
Well, the space is so wide now, isn't it? I mean, what you've described there is, blockchain from the point of view, I'd say Ethereum and potentially Cardano and a couple of other blockchains where they're
smart contracts,
allowing other things to happen on top. Yeah, so it's smart contract based, decentralized apps that you're allowed to basically publish, create and monetize applications using Ethereum as the Ether, sorry, as the cryptocurrency. But yeah, you've got, as the space develops, and they reckon we're currently in, like, was it 1996, 1997 in terms of, if you compare the cryptocurrency blockchain space to the internet, we're currently in year 96, 97. So we're just at the, the very, very infancy of it. But it's accelerating so quick that the use case as this happens is just creating exponential. So we talk
just to expand on that, Richard, when they say we're at 1996 for the internet, are they using adoption as the metric, like number of people that are on it?
Yeah, it is adoption basically in terms of where we are. But I guess that isn't reflected in kind of the innovation level and just the expansion of all the different things that are going on in the space. So they all do different things, and they're all creating value in their own way. And some of them are creating zero value. We've all heard about Doge and things like that, and people might have a perspective on that, but it's still, that's what it is. Sometimes it is about perspective. So I suppose when they've got a utility, that you have to investigate those from. Sorry, was it Justin that said the foundry there? Is that Justin? Yeah. Yep. When he was saying how he's invested in companies before and done valuations, you would apply the same methodology really at that point to pick a cryptocurrency or pick a project, and you would do a deep dive as much as you could do in relation to that, in terms of looking at the people involved, the track record, the plan they've got, which would be a white paper in most instances. That would be how you would look at what it is that they are doing. So that would be how you would kind of try and create your own value around it. But you have to take into consideration lots of other things, as Daniel said at the moment, because there is access to the average person. The average person, the retail investor, can go and buy cryptocurrencies probably a lot easier. Well, they would probably jump into space a lot quicker than they would have the traditional market. So because it's new, people are doing that. So that creates a different perception of valuation in some instances. But obviously, you know, you've got the, but it is still about perception at the end of the day, and innovation about where we are. I mean, Bitcoin has been, you know, is where this all started, and you could argue, some people would argue, it's got no value to it whatsoever. But if it's a scarce asset that's depleting in, well, you know, we know there's a fixed supply of it, that's where its valuation can be, its value can be derived from, in the same way as people value gold. But no one really knows exactly how much gold is in the ground. So, but we know exactly how much Bitcoin is going to be mined. So, you know, it's such a big question, I think, in terms of deriving value, and unless you go specifically into a project and start talking about it. So I always tend to kind of zoom back out a lot more and kind of look at the bigger space, I guess. Whereas I guess Jerry now can talk about the value of something like XRP, which is coming back onto everyone's radars. I think at the moment it's interesting that it's come up in this conversation, I think, today. So Jerry, I think for the benefit of the group, if you just do a quick summary of what XRP does and how you perceive or what the perception is of people that are invested in it, in terms of the valuation of something like XRP, which is quite unique, I guess, to the crypto space in terms of its utility.
Me, I'll do it in the context of the ISO number, or whatever you call that, and the friction that Daniel talked about earlier. ISO, you know, and I've, you know,
can you just cover as well, just so people like why and what an ISO even is, why it's even important?
Well, you know, like you might drive down the highway and see on the side of the warehouses that line the highway a big sign that says ISO, and then you'll see a number or something, but it's a standard. It's a standard that an industry or you know, part of an industry adopts, right? So in banking, say, the communication standard in banking, see if anybody knows this acronym, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, right? SWIFT. So even such a silly name as that, it's the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. You know, that SWIFT is the last standard that banks had to communicate with each other, and it's 40 years old, right? So to me, when there's a new standard coming out, ISO 20022, that crypto can reach the level of, then to me, that's inherent value. Then that's a no, it doesn't mean if your company or your entity isn't running at ISO 200, standards, you still may be able to communicate with a bank, but you're not guaranteed, right? So it's a threshold of communication with banks. So, you know, ideally we're talking internationally. So a lot of the friction, and Daniel talked about this bank doesn't talk to this bank, but in these countries they do. Typically in the rest of the world, they have to communicate through this bank. So there's so many things going on. I had no idea until I kind of dove into it. But not only is every stage getting a cut, but it slows it down. If anybody's used Swift, you know, you might send 10 or 20 or however many thousands of dollars, and you just have to wave goodbye to it. You know, it's like somebody crossing the ocean in a dinghy. You hope they get there. I think I read somewhere 6% of Swift transactions need human involvement. And when you think about, like, I think 5 trillion a day, I heard Swift moves around, 6% of that is such a huge amount of money. So to me, to look at a new technology like crypto, it's almost a no-brainer to get into crypto that has a pre-determined approval of sorts, you know, especially when, you know, now you look at something like XRP, and if you think about XRP being a bank transfer coin, I've been told, it's been something I read a lot about, that Stellar XLM would be more the consumer back and forth coin. I don't know if it has to do with, I know Stellar's partnered with USDC in some way, but there's a lot of talk about Stellar XLM being the, I don't know, call it people's coin, and XRP is the banker's coin. Now there's also in the middle of that XDC, which is really, like, it's been going crazy out on the charts as far as going up. But XDC is a coin that kind of fits in the middle of those two. I wish I knew more about it. I own a truckload of it, but as far as I know, it's a smart contract platform that is integrated into the ISO program. But to me, like that, like in the conversation of value, to meet the banks on their terms and communicate with them on their level, on their international level, is something that is not only going to be appealing to them. The bank's trust list would be a 4-letter word for a bank, right? So the bank is going to look at that ISO almost as the trust that they need to deal with that entity. So, remembering I'm on an art school platform here when I'm talking about banking. So that's about as deep as I've gone with my understanding of it. But because we can't send 10 cents over the internet, as you said, then we can't send $10 million either. But we can send crypto over the internet. So the idea of XRP, the very simple idea of XRP, is somebody in South America, some bank, some country, some person in South America wants to send money to Italy. In Central America, they take their $10 million, they buy XRP. They can't send 10 cents over the internet, but they can send $10 million of XRP over the internet in a couple of seconds. It happens so quickly. What Ripple is a software company primarily. They launched a software that was called Xcurrent, that was then called XRapid, I think, and then it switched to ODL, which is on-demand liquidity. And what that software does with the banks can use Ripple software now without using XRP, and they can use it to more quickly, more efficiently, and more accurately send current fiat money all around the world. They can use the ODR, the Ripple software for that and they can realize a certain percentage of gains because it is so much more efficient. But when they introduce XRP to that equation, it just speeds everything up, and they can save more money.
Jerry, I just want to bring an analogy into here, just to kind of pull all that together. If you can imagine, in a way, we're talking about almost tokenizing assets. I'm talking to Justin and maybe Louise here and a couple of others. If you imagine that there's a highway or rails, we use the word rails a lot. So if there's rails set up around the world, which is what XRP is, think of it like rails between anybody that has an XRP wallet. So there's a rail between my phone and Jerry's phone, let's say, and anyone that's got an XRP wallet. And on these rails are empty or flatbed, let's say, train trucks. And I can put on that flatbed train truck anything I want. I can put on it $10 million. And the rail truck will send it wherever it needs to go in 4 seconds, about. And then at the other side, people can take it off. So you could put money onto it and forget how, just think of it from an analogy perspective. But you could also start to say, well, hang on, I've got, I'm going to use an asset. I've got a house, and the house is worth so much money. I could move my whole house onto these railroads, but I could split the house up into 1,000 mini parts. So I could sell 1,000th of my house to Jerry as a token. Now he can't come and claim it physically, but at the minute, if I have a house, I either sell all the house, or I rent the house, or I borrow against the house. the minute you can tokenize something and put it onto an XRP ledger, then you can break that house down into as many fractional parts as you want. So much so that I could go to the shop and buy a pack of chewing gum for 30 cents. I doubt very much a pack of chewing gum is 30 cents anymore, but $1. And I could use, in effect, 1 brick from my house. Now, you couldn't do that today because there's, one, you can't break the house down, and 2, there's so much friction that if you were doing that no one could take that payment. So I'm just trying to wrap all that up because we're really trying to understand, like, how is value derived? And we live in a world of information. When I was growing up, if I wanted to learn what the capital of Peru was, I had to go to a library, or if I was from a good enough family, my family had an encyclopedia. If those two things didn't exist, or I didn't know somebody, you couldn't find that information out. Now we can find whatever information we want, send what information we want right now, immediately. You know, I can run my own TV station right now. But when it comes to money, and I think Greg Garlinghouse said this, who created Ripple and XRP, he said it's quicker to go on an aeroplane and fly to Australia with a suitcase full of money, get off the airport, get a train to the beach, walk down the beach and give it to someone and go home, than it is to send it via Swift. Swift is 3 or 4 days. I can get to Australia and back on foot, you know, personally, quicker than I can send money electronically in 2021. And when I read that, I was like, that's pretty bonkers, especially when most money is just digital, like it's just numbers on a screen. So these 3 conversations we just shared is to really start to understand this value proposition of crypto. And we've not even, I'm surprised actually, none of us have even talked about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the odd one out from all of them. Bitcoin is digital, let's just say digital gold, in the sense of, Jerry may have a slightly different view because he's really big into XRP, and there's usually a lot of friction between some of these clubs, let's say, online, but we try within Future Leaders to talk about everything from a flat perspective. But Bitcoin was the first one that came. Nobody owns it, nobody controls it. There's a lot of conspiracies over who might control it, but that is the same in all of crypto. But you have a product which can be transferred between entities and parties very fast compared to gold, and can be a store of value. And that's the really big thing in times of war, in times of oppression, when people are looking for stores of value and people are moving their money out fiat. And just in case, like when we refer to fiat, do you know what we're referring to or not? Is that?
Yeah, just the world's traditional currency.
Yeah, cool. Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when we're moving out of fiat, people want to know what is the best store of value. And traditionally, you're looking at gold or metals and property. But property is often linked with fiat. So Bitcoin and certain other cryptocurrencies, but particularly Bitcoin, is referred to as a digital store of value. And just like any currency, the strength of that value is derived from the public. When I hold up a $10 note, you know, it's not even that backed by a government at the end of the day. All fiat currencies go to zero over time. What makes a $10 note worth $10 is because we all believe it will buy a loaf of bread. The minute I think the loaf of bread is worth more than $10, I won't take the $10. So there's 2 parts to this value within crypto. One is the practical, mechanical, functional side of what crypto is enabling us to do. And none of what we talked about there really covered decentralization. Like Richard said, there's so much in this market. But once that value is seen, the real value comes from the people. It comes from the people that choose to buy the token and hold it, just like a stock. If everyone buys the stock and holds it, the price goes up because there's less of it on the market. So there's 21 million Bitcoin, about 4 million now, 3.5 million are lost, which takes us to 18. We still haven't mined 3 million, which takes us to 15. So of the 15 million Bitcoin in circulation, there's only about 3 million that is available to buy. 12 million of the 15 million is locked away in cold storage and vaults. So that's a really small amount. And the more that people buy any coin, any token, any cryptocurrency, and they hold it and they don't choose to sell it, the higher the value goes. And that value is determined because people are saying, I choose to obtain this token and put it away, which is an indication to the market that the collective consciousness of that token, of people buying that token, says it's of value because of the fact they're holding it. And when everyone dumps it, it means there's less value. So before we move on, because this topic came up because of Justin's question, I want to make sure, Justin, is that a good enough round robin? And is there anything in particular that is a looming unanswered question that we could cover quickly before we move on to the preparation for winter?
No, that was a good introduction. And so kind of I have a little bit of a better understanding. So yeah, as we move forward, I would be then interested to know how some of these various, crypto strategies or whatever that give returns, how they are creating those returns.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll see if we can cover that. Let's see how far we get into this winter side of things. But I'm glad that was a good enough round robin into it, because it's easy. It really is easy to forget the value when you've been in it for long enough. But I tell you now, we could have 15 people on this call, each talking for 10 minutes, and they'd each share a completely different perspective of how and where crypto delivers value, because I've never seen an industry that is so pervasive across the world, as touching everything. It is humbling to see how far and wide crypto and blockchain can reach. Okay, so let's
to summarize it. It's very like using the internet analogy is quite good, because 96, 97, none of us were really using the internet, but you couldn't live without it. Now we wouldn't be sat here having this conversation, any of these things, So you just think of all the nascent kind of industries that span out of it. We're that early on, and all of them basically at this next level are around, I guess, convenience, innovation and automation. So it's around removing barriers in whatever, whether that's people or fees or any of these sort of things. It's around just unlocking potential for things to happen quicker, faster, more convenient, and without people in the way. Just kind of like automated.
And that's the essence of Web 3.0. Like Web 3.0 is this new third layer within the internet, where Richard just said it's effortless, it's frictionless, it just happens. Go on, Jerry.
Well, when you talk about what was it?
If you've lost it.
When you talk about adoption, the internet seemed, kind of living through it, it seemed like a slow build. But then you listen to somebody like Brad Garlinghouse, who is an XRP guy in the financial world, and he describes what's happening or what's about to happen now as drip, 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 flood. And it makes it sound like there's going to be a switch. Now, I read a lot about the banks, the partnerships, the governments, the currencies, all that stuff, and everybody is building to something. There seems to be so much going on, right? Ripple has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of banks that they partner with, and those banks have banks, and so it makes me wonder: is there going to be a switch? And even in the U.S. around the time of the first stimulus, when I read that, there was a point in there about banks giving everybody crypto wallets, right? Now that was taken out before the stimulus went through in the States, but there was a big section that was written into the stimulus about banks being given crypto wallets. It was the first time. Now, banks in the States have been given the authority, if that's the right word, to hold crypto for people. And I think as soon as you have the authority to hold it, then you'll be able to do other things with it too. You'll be able to sell it and leverage it and all that stuff. So this drip, drip, drip flood, as far as adoption goes, makes me think we're going to wake up one day and we're going to sign into our bank account. There'll be checking, savings, and crypto. And I think it's going to, and whether that's going to be the flood part, but it just makes me question: is this going to be a normal adoption curve, right? And we've all seen the cycles that we, so I decided to throw that out.
I was just trying to find, then I saw an article come from the World Economic Forum today that talked about, you know how we know this term universal basic income? They're referring to it as, and I'm wondering if they're trying to rebrand it, universal pocket money is what they're calling it. And I can't find the article. I will find it though. It came through today. And when I skim read it earlier, like they're looking as quickly as possible to create directly from the World Bank, directly from central banks, wallets for everyone on the planet, so that you provide them your KYC details, know your customer, you get a wallet and they'll give you stimulus directly into it, bypassing any government. So it's a whole conversation, Justin, for UBI and what it means. And there's a darker side within cryptocurrencies, within blockchain, with regards to privacy, because the one thing a blockchain is fully transparent. Now, for as long as all the different nodes don't have identity attached to them, you can see all the money moving between A and B, but you don't know who A is and you don't know who B is. But if you're a World Bank and to open up a wallet, you have to provide your passport details. As a World Bank, I can see every single person on the planet that has a wallet. I can see where they're spending it, how much they're spending. And to some people, they are not bothered about that. But if you're bothered about privacy, or you think that it is a human right, then you will be bothered about it. So there's a whole big piece within it that a lot of people discuss, but I'm conscious of time. I want to make sure we just keep moving forward. So this is all around value so far. Now, one of the big things that's been coming out recently is around regulation. If you're already a USA citizen, regulation goes hand in glove. I mean, the USA financial industry is one of the most arduous on the planet in terms of how far they regulate. But what's happened in the last couple of weeks, whenever I see world leaders talk on stage and they all begin or say in their speeches the same sentence in the same way, that tells me that in recent times before that, they all got together to discuss something, because the fact that they're using the same narrative in every one is very curious. So with crypto, about 2 weeks ago, 4 different countries regulated Binance. For Justin's purpose, Binance is one of the largest crypto exchanges on the planet, if not the largest. Definitely top 3, but I would maybe even argue it's the biggest. And in the same week,
would that be like synonymous with Kraken? They're both exchanges for cryptos.
Bingo. Kraken's the other way. Kraken is like US based. It now has a US banking license. You know, if I could buy Kraken shares, well, you can, but not anymore. If I could buy more, I would, because Kraken is the first crypto exchange to be granted a US banking license. Now they have to have 100% reserve, so they can't fractionally lend out. But that's really big news. Binance is a little bit more gray. You know, it operates in multiple jurisdictions. It has bits of regulation here or there. You know, it's not quite followed the doing everything it should path. And so 4 different countries all came out in the same week to either ban it fully, which I think is what Canada's done. Canada's got until December 21st for every citizen to withdraw their funds or their accounts are closed. In the UK, I still haven't worked out fully what they're doing in the UK. This is what Alan's question was about. At first, it looked like they'd banned futures, which is like leverage trading, effectively like gambling. But then on the same day, all withdrawals got suspended. Recently, you can no longer even buy cryptocurrency, just spot price buying with a credit card. Then the other day, you can't buy with a bank transfer. You can still withdraw with a bank transfer, but and I don't know what the other countries, how far it went, but the fact that this happened in 4 different countries, big countries, you know, UK, Canada, I can't remember what the other 2 were, all at the same time, is incredibly curious for me. And there was a bit of FUD that came out the other day. FUD stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's a term used for negative news, let's say. And it doesn't mean the negative news is false, but when all of a sudden it kind of goes out, because the crypto market is unregulated by and large, when there's a load of negative news that comes out, that can sway the market massively. And you can buy news whenever you want. You know, you pay Forbes enough money, they'll run you an article. So you have to be careful with negative news, because sometimes it's designed to create a bit of a dump, and then whoever created the news can buy in. So it's not that negative news is false. It's just don't take it at face value. So when all of that came out, and Louise, this talks to you a little bit about future predictions, in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of talk, negative talk, FUD talk about crypto, followed up with a lot of authoritative news, governments saying things. And when governments say things, when people are on the fence in terms of their belief in crypto, and a government says, we think crypto's bad, or you know, or risky, those people that are on the fence often will dump, because they're already, you know, should I be in this? You take someone that's a bit more of a seasoned crypto person, they don't really care what a government's going to say, because their view's much more solid in terms of why they're here and what they're looking for. So this last year, we've seen a lot of institutional adoption. Now, they're only in it for the money, but we have seen a massive uptake in retail adoption. But this is my personal view. So much of that retail adoption is on the fence. You know, they've put in 5% of their money, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. And so, and they're very willing, if they see a 20% drop in the markets, to sell. And remember that if you had a 20% drop in the stock market, people will commit suicide. You have a 20% drop in the crypto market, we call that a Tuesday. You know, it's worlds apart in terms of what goes on. So if someone's on the fence and there's a lot of FUD, that can create a very negative, that can create a downwards market. So most people in crypto have speculated that regulation is coming. It's the only route forward. People always say to me, oh, they'll ban Bitcoin. I do not think they'll ban Bitcoin. Why would they? Like, you're talking about the greatest taxable event in the history of a government. There's so much money to be made by regulating Bitcoin, because you can't tax somebody if it's illegal. So it's easier for them to regulate it than it is to make it illegal. So I think big regulation is coming. I think what we've seen this last month is the beginnings of things going into position, and the planting of seeds of what's to come. I don't know if, Richard, you want to share any different views. There's a lot of information out there, and it's difficult even for us to know what to lay our fingers on as anchors. But what's your take on it, Richard, from a regulation perspective?
I think you've covered it fairly well in terms of it's happening. You know, I think, to me, what I can sort of, the parallels I can see, and this is why XRP has become a bit more interesting again, is because, you know, they're currently going under their SEC battle in terms of courts, whether it's the security and how they've handled the business and all the rest of it over years. But I think what you mentioned earlier about, you know, you'll wake up one day and you've got a wallet from a central bank that has got your, you know, you've been given some money, whatever, however you want to phrase it, and they want to create their own central bank digital currency. So this is where there's a momentum behind it, I think, because of that. And I think stable coins like USDT and all these different things, that's the problem, I think. I don't know whether it's specifically certain projects that they would deem as securities or not. I think if you look at the SEC website, there's something like 140 coins that they intend to go after in the same way as they do with Ripple. So Ripple is quite an XRP is quite a fundamental case in terms of proving how it goes. So that is going to be very interesting in terms of how that goes, because I think it will either put the blocker on certain things, or it will open the floodgates to other coins being invented or other crypto investigated. Sorry, but I do think that stable coins pose quite a big threat to the planned central bank digital currencies that they're talking about. And I think Jerry mentioned there's going to be some sort of big event where certain things rise to the top. That could be XRP, it could be anything. It could be, you know, in terms of certain coins, it could be any of those sort of things. But I can't help but think that particularly privacy coins and stable coins are going to be the ones that really probably get the most attention initially. But without doubt, they want to be able to tax it. And if these exchanges like Binance and KuCoin, or I don't like KuCoin at this point, but I heard that Bybit today also is another one that's going to start implementing Know Your Customer a lot more. The opportunity for you to kind of stay under the radar, if that's what you want to do, is becoming much more difficult. And just for them to operate and continue their businesses, they're just going to have to start complying. So that pressure just comes down. But it's coming, as you say, it's coming from lots of different angles. But I can't help but think that central bank digital currencies and stable coins, you wonder how they're going to operate in the same space. And we know that, you know, Tether in particular will be one. It is one that's constantly under scrutiny, basically. And there's lots of different schools of thought to that. I saw watching some research the other day that said, you know, Tether is going to be fine. It's not going to be an issue. But it depends how much. All it takes is sentiment to change massively, and for regulations to become hit hard, or certain avenues for you to sort of cash out, if that's what you need to do, as we'll talk about in the bear market. You just need a few of those options to close for a panic sell, in the same way that we saw, you know, Bitcoin and the entire crypto market sort of change. But something like that, where people have to stay in crypto completely rather than exit into dollars or whatever it is, in terms of to be able to sell, to be able to sort of live, you know, that's a potential danger. So it's a total unknown at this point, but you definitely get the whiff that there is a lot going on behind the scenes, both with retail banks, central banks, and then whatever you want to call the World Bank and the IMF, whether they're banks or not, or what their agenda is. But there's something definitely going on, and we just need to be aware of it. I think it can't really change your decision making a lot of the time, but you can certainly, you know, set precautions in place, whatever those may be, based on your personal circumstance, I think.
Yeah, there's something you said, Richard, once to me on one of these calls that I've used a few times recently. You said, it's when we did the tax call, and you said, don't let the tail wag the dog, referring to, like, don't let your worry and concerns about the tax man hinder you from, like, moving forward. Because even if you make 200% profit and you've got to pay a shitload of tax, that's better than not making any profit and paying no tax. You know, so kind of move forward. So I think even with this, something big is occurring. Like, every industry changes, and one of the oldest industries that's not changed so far is finance. And so much of crypto, really, like finance and contracts, are the two big chunks in crypto in terms of problems that they solve. So I think it is logical that finance is the next big one. And then when we look at the developments, XRP and everything else, it's right in front of us. So it makes perfect sense. And these sorts of systems, again, it makes sense that there's a switch. Everything gets into place. All right, guys, we're moving from, in the UK, we have something called decimalization day, the day when we had a point after the pound, £1 10 pence. Whereas in the past, it was 4 shillings and a crown. You know, so we moved to there was a certain day when all systems changed over decimal places. And it kind of makes sense that would occur within the banking system, that everyone moves across from SWIFT onto whatever it might be. So these things are coming. We have no idea what they are. And if you go online, once you get below a certain point of rabbit hole investigations, I mean, you lose weeks. So I have to take a stance at some point and go, okay, I don't know, but something's coming. And so it's about taking my positions as best as I can. And a bit like betting on the horses, you know, you've got a good spread on the horses, then you'll probably, a few of them will get over the line and some of them might fall over if it's the Grand National in the UK. Did I cut someone off then? Did someone else want to share before we move on?
No, I just in an example, I guess. We've talked about value. We've talked about where we are in terms of the adoption cycle, you know, very, very early on. But the fact that people are, you know, people, I'm talking about big institutions and people that, you know, the World Bank and IMF and the banking system are taking notice. The fact we're so early on, to me, you know, they can see the writing on the wall in terms of how that they need to make some moves in this space, and the way they can start to do it is to try and scare people out of the market in one way. But in terms of, again, I suppose just trying to thread back to the valuation piece, I saw a piece to say Ethereum, for example, is where, you know, most of if not all of decentralized finance currently operates. And to give you an idea of the potential price, I think it's not even at 0.5%. It's a fraction of a percent of the traditional market, isn't it? But if 0.5% of the traditional market moved into DeFi on Ethereum, the median price of Ethereum would be $19,000. So, you know, that trajectory makes all these people that want to regulate crypto and get into it, and the bank, from a banking perspective, this is why it's happening, you know. But there's so many different things all happening at the same time over this last 18 months, and it's just gone crazy. You know, in terms of the space, it's confusing at the best of times, but it doesn't help when all this is going on at the same time. But like you say, all we can do is kind of make the best decisions we can and absorb information from the sources that we can. I think you're muted, bro.
I'm muting myself, yeah. So with all of that, there's a potential that we're moving into a crypto winter. Summer being, you know, the big blossom, everything's expanding, that's the bull run, and winter being the consolidation and the bear run. This kind of is a back answer to Justin's question and moving into Louise's question, one of them, like where's this going into the future? Nobody knows at all. My personal view, this is my personal view, I don't think we have already seen the all-time high this cycle. I feel like there's too much institution, there's too much of everything to have seen the height already. I also don't think that we've seen all the pain, because I think that this cycle is the institutional cycle. I think the next cycle, all the institutions will be in and it'll be ready for retail people. So I think the institutions, because they can manipulate the market, that has been shown, enough people have come forward and we've seen it. To get down from 30K Bitcoin to 20K, there's tons of support at 20K. I think he's perfectly reasonable. There's enough people talking about it. The market is kind of half expecting it. They're just looking for these triggers. And if there's a big enough dump and it creates a sell-off, it will happen. So I think both. I think there will be another dump. I think it'll be painful. I think it will shake a lot of weak hands from the tree who will sell, especially those people that are wavering. I'm not saying you're wavering, Louise, but you're a perfect example of, you got in at, I'm going to guess 50, 60K BTC value. And this is the same for me in 2017. I got in at the height and just watched everything go down. And it's, you know, it ain't fun. So I think some of those people will go, fuck it, I'm going to get out. So I think that will occur, but I still think we'll see 100K, or, you know, we'll still see a 70, 80, 90K Bitcoin by the end of this cycle. I don't think we're going to fully enter a winter. However, I am preparing for winter. I am preparing for interest earning. I am preparing for making my crypto work for myself. But that's my summarized view of what I think's left in this cycle. Richard, do you want to share, if you have a view on, if you could put your money on black or red or whatever, what would it be on, or are you in the middle?
No, I agree. I'm exactly the same. We've talked about it on many occasions, haven't we? So I don't think, I think there's still a chance that we've had the all-time high, but as you say, no one actually knows. So what happens next? I think there's this range that I was saying today where it was to be talked about a no man's land between 32 and 40k, which is very, very wide at the moment. But it's got to hold those positions, and that will potentially signal which way, whether we're going to go to all-time high or not.
By no man's land, you mean for as long as it's in that range,
No
we
one really
don't know
knows.
whether it's going to go up or down.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah, okay.
going to range in between this space, and everyone's going to go, it's coming back, and then it'll go down again. I mean, the amount of weekends we've had where it's just like, it's been horrific, you know, but it's just a weekend, right? And it picks back up again after on a Monday. So, but yeah, but I think that the human cycle, you've got this play at the moment with things we've just been talking around regulation, but without that in mind, we're kind of in this debt cycle at the moment. I think that, you know, there's two phases of a debt cycle. One is like short term, sort of 5 to 8 years, which normally ends in a recession, and then you've got a long term one, which is more like 80 years, which ends in a depression. And the current banking system is doing absolutely everything it can at the moment, printing money to prevent us going into certainly a depression anyway. But everything's being masked at the moment. And then you've kind of got the stock market. The stock market is always, it's still correlated to the crypto market. And when you actually study the waves and things, it strangely, or strangely or not, I don't know, it follows kind of the halving of Bitcoin. So that suggests, from what I can see, that we're going to end up in a bear market somewhere in the middle of 2022 next year. That's what that scenario would say. And, you know, Bitcoin is going to dominate what happens next. So the rest of the market will kind of follow that. And if we are to believe from previous cycles, then we're going to be somewhere between July and October where that top is going to be. And then that's going to, you know, once we reach that point next year, we're going to be followed by big crash and then a gradual decline for 12 months. And then we'll be at the bottom, and then that will be the bear market.
It's just good to note at this point, though, that if that plays out, the bottom of the bear market in, let's say, 2022, 2023, won't be as low, or is unlikely to be as low as where we are now. So if we do get up to the most correction we've ever seen is an 80% correction. So if we touch in 100K, then, and if that correction played out again, that would be a 20 grand BTC. But I think, my opinion is, when that next big dump comes, because there'll be so much institutions do not want an 80% correction. I think they're going to make that correction happen now to get in and then ride it up. So the bigger the players that come in that want stability will be found in the market. So that's another moving piece to come in, that, yeah, we've had these cycles, but there's something fundamentally different about this cycle, and that is big players with billions of dollars.
Yeah, for sure. I think, though, there's potentially sort of three things that can, you know, the bear market, the winter, there's potentially three options that can play out. And one will be a regular bear market, which is around, you know, the strategy at that point is hodling and dollar cost averaging throughout that period. And like you say, I think the bottom at that point will be somewhere between the region of 20 to 30K. But there's also the chance of hyperinflation. So everything will go like parabolic in terms of dollar terms, but the actual purchasing power sort of will drop. So in that instance, it's about what's your cryptocurrency worth against other stuff. and whether you can spend it or not. And because the dollars or pounds or any sort of fiat currency at that point is going to be not worth a lot. Or you've got like the potential depression market, which is not what no one kind of wants. And there might be too many things in the way, like you said, to stop that. Like with institutions, and no one wants to see everything drop. So it depends what's going on behind it. I think probably you can't help but see how we're not going to end up in a hyperinflation bear market, really. So it's around, that's like, you don't want to sell your crypto assets for dollars at that point unless you absolutely need to. It's about trying to find a mechanism for exchange so you can spend your your crypto if that's what you need to do, where you said, and that's where innovation will come back in, basically, and there'll be ways and means to do that, not immediately, but it will do. So yeah, that's the way I see it at the moment. And I just think at the moment everyone is just waiting. There's so much going on, there's so much to take in, no one really knows, but there's lots of opportunities out there.
So that brings us on to then like preparing for that winter market, because there's only, unless you're trading, which we don't really advocate in Future Leaders, but if you can trade. But most people, like 96% of people who trade, lose, which is pretty much everybody. So unless you're trading, there's only two ways you make money in crypto. Either you're just like a house, either you're buying low and the price of it's going up, which means the value of your assets are increasing, or you make the assets work for you, which in a house analogy would be renting it out. In the crypto space, making something work for you, there's quite a few options. But if we're moving into a bear market, then the first option, which is asset appreciation, isn't an option, because in a bear market, things are going down. So this is why we've got to prepare for the winter market. You've got to make the decision, what's my stance? Am I going to sell all of my portfolio, wait for it to go down and try and time and get back in? Am I going to hold on to it all, hold on for dear life? Or am I going to sell some of it? That there's a view with regards to how much of my assets am I keeping? The second side of it then is, okay, I've decided I'm going to keep 50%, 100%, whatever. Now what am I going to do with it? And this then opens up the world of, let's say, earning income. And there's a few ways to cover them really quickly, just for Justin, because I want to go on to liquidity pools. There are sites designed that lend out your cryptocurrency. So they'll lend it out on your behalf, and you'll get a return for that, anywhere from 4 or 5% to 15%. It depends on which cryptocurrency it is. That's a really standard thing within crypto. There are companies there are things called staking, which is, think of it like a coin. I create a coin and I want to incentivize people to not sell it. So these are people that believe the value of these Flask tokens is going to go up, so everyone buys them. But I don't want people to sell them. So I say, hey, if you stake your Flask token and you lock it for 1 year, I'll pay you 5%. So Jerry's bought Flask token. He believes in it. He likes it. He thinks it's going to be worth more next year. So it could just be sat in Binance. But I say, why sit it in Binance? Lock it in my site. And if you lock it, I'll pay you 5%. Jerry says, cool, I get 5%. I'm happy with that. Why would I do that? Because if it's locked for a year, there's less of it on the market, less chance of it being sold. There's more scarcity, price rises. So lending, staking, some people just think they're the same because they get an interest, but they're slightly different. Farming, we're not going to go into, but in short, farming is putting your coin in, being paid out in phones, putting your phones into another market that wants phones, being paid out in tomatoes, taking your tomatoes and locking those up in the apple, getting paid out in apples, and then getting paid out in flasks. And farming is where you're constantly chopping and changing where you're locking things up and being paid out in a different token and taking that token and locking that up in a different token. Much more complexity, much more risk, much more reward. But the one I want to quickly come on to is liquidity pools. Neither me nor Richard are experts in liquidity pools at all. We've only recently started dabbling this year in them. But in short, liquidity pools are, if I am an exchange like Kraken or Binance, and I want to start selling tomato coins. Jerry wants to buy tomato coins. So he comes on my exchange. He says, hey, I want to buy tomato coins. I say, I haven't got any. Jerry's going to leave. Just like any market, you walk into the market, you walk up to the stall, you say, have you got any tomatoes? He says, no, you leave. So as a market provider, as a stall provider, I want tomatoes. So I go to Louise, I go to Omar, I go to Justin, I say, hey guys, if you bring tomatoes to me, I'll give you a return. And why would I do that? Because now I've got tomatoes on my stand and people will come and use them. So I'm providing liquidity to keep it going. Liquidity pools come along where you might lock up one or two different tokens together. Again, providing more liquidity to allow people to move between them. So usually in a liquidity pool, one of the tokens is a big name provider. It might be a stable coin like USDT. It might be Ethereum. It might be Binance token. And most people are coming to the market with Binance token, with this big token. And in exchange, they want this new one. They want tomato coin, cake coin, whatever. So you lock up both of these and that provides enough liquidity of moving between the two. That's a really short analogy of what a liquidity pool is. And there's more complexity to it than that, but let's keep it at that for now. Because Omar's question was, if he wants to start providing this liquidity, what should I look for? The big things to look for with it that I've certainly found within this, the big things that are most important are around what are the two tokens? So there's a term within liquidity pools called impermanent loss. And impermanent loss means one of these tokens has a high chance of going to zero. So usually this one. If the one on the left here is the big stable coin, it's the Binance, it's the big top player. If this is some obscure coin that's brand new, there's a chance that people just don't value it. So if this goes to zero and the liquidity pool crashes, you have no more value left in the liquidity pool. So I might put $1,000 within 500 and 500. But as the value of this lowers, so does this, to the point where my total amount of value in the pool might only be $50. Yeah, I've been getting paid out 10,000% return. Some of the returns we've seen, I think the highest return I've seen something like 260,000% return. 260,000% return. I mean, you can't even get your head around that. But these things don't last long. And some of them are on very obscure sites. So you've got, well, who created the liquidity pool? How much do I trust it? They're all based on smart contracts, which earlier when we were talking was whereby I can exchange something with Jerry and I don't need a middleman. People make these things called smart contracts, but they can be exploited. They can have bugs in them. They can be hacked. They could be maliciously created on purpose, just so that as everyone dumps their money in, someone's written a backdoor, siphons all the money out, gone. So if you're going to get into liquidity pools, work with big name players, PancakeSwap, 1inch, Uniswap, Binance, KuCoin, sites that have shown the industry that they exist for the purpose they say they exist for. There's whole new ones, Beef Swap, Cow Swap. There's so many that have sprung up. They're always got some sort of food name in them. And so I'm sure some of them are fine, but if you're going to get into liquidity and you're looking at hacks and things like that, then you really want to be going on sites where they've been audited a little bit, because the bugs that are in these contracts come out a lot. So I only dabble a little bit in liquidity pools, and I only really dabble in the big name ones because that's all I'm interested in. And be really, really cautious of greed. Greed in crypto will blind you from, I'm not going to say truth, but skepticism,
Reality.
caution, reality. Like 260,000% return, your first thought should be, that's dodgy. You know, it doesn't mean you can't get it, or, you know, it needs further investigation. It means, right, I might go in for a day and I might use proper risk management. That means less than 1% of your fund. So if you've got $100, you're going to put $1 in. That's it. And you might get out of that $10 in a day. Brilliant. But understand that, and you watch it like a hawk. So at the other end of the scale of liquidity pools are liquidity pools that have got 2 stable coins. For Justin's sake, a stable coin is a crypto version of a fiat currency. So if I want to sell my Bitcoin to something that's stable, I don't have to sell it all the way out into fiat. I can just sell it into something called USDT, which is a privately owned coin that is pegged to the dollar. $1 is always worth 1 tether, 1 USDT, United States dollar tether. So, but people swap between these stable coins all the time. So I could have Tether, which is stable coin A, and I could have Circle, which is stable coin B. Both of them are USD. There's no impermanent loss here, because this will always be worth $1. This will always be worth $1. It means none of them are going to go to zero. So my chance of putting permanent loss, really low. The returns I can get, 40 to 80% a year. I still have to watch it, still have to check it, because the chance of it being siphoned and hacked could still be there. But when it was created by Uniswap or PancakeSwap, meaning the site made it, it's been audited, the pool has been live for a year. These are all signs that tell me that this pool is a stronger pool. I don't earn 20,000% return, but I'm quite happy with a 40, 50% return. So the downside is that if you put $10,000 in it, in a year, it's still only worth $10,000 because you've got no appreciation, because they're stable coins. And some people are like, well, I want my money in a crypto, so I want it in something like Bitcoin. I'm willing to ride that change. So there's different risks. And I'm speaking about this because from Omar's perspective, he might not have any USDT. He might not have any stable coin. He might only have $20,000 worth of crypto, in which case that's not an option. So liquidity pools are not bad. They're just different ways of earning. They definitely need more, not maintenance, monitoring. And there's sites and apps that do this for you. You need to monitor them, and you need to understand the risk before you get in, because that will determine how much you monitor it. The higher the risk, the closer the monitor, the more you have to be aware of greed. The lower the risk, the less you need to monitor it, the less you need to be bothered about greed, because it's probably not going to hit you the same as a 20,000% return.
I don't understand the term slippage. Does that have to do with LPs?
Yes. So slippage, when you're buying a token, if I say to Jerry, I'm going to sell you a token, Jerry, for $100, 1 token, $100. He gives me $100, I give him a token. Cool. When you're on an open market, slippage is how much, or think of it like tolerance. I'm willing to spend $100 on a token, and I'm willing to have 10% slippage. That means you're willing to effectively pay $110 for the token, because there's people selling things at different rates, and some coins have got built into them fee structures. So every time this coin is sold, they're built into it. It'll say you can't sell this coin without a 10% slippage. That 10%, 5% goes to all of the people that own the coin. So everyone gets a split of all that fees. 3% goes to the manufacturer of the coin for marketing. 2% goes to the creator of the coin, whatever. Yeah. So that slippage is there is sometimes sometimes the slippage is there because there's not much liquidity in the market. So you need the slippage to buy the coin, otherwise there's no coins for sale. And sometimes the slippage is built into the token because that's part of the tokenomics. It's part of why a token's created. And they do that because if you own a token that says, for as long as you own this token, every time someone buys this token, you'll get paid. Again, that incentivizes you to what? Hold it. And everyone that makes a coin wants people to keep a hold of it. So you're seeing slippage happening more and more these days because it incentivizes people to keep hold of those coins. It's not a massive money earner, but if you own a decent amount of coins that have got 10% slippage, you would be surprised how much you can earn on that, especially if the price starts to appreciate. Because if you're getting paid 10% of a coin and it's only worth 0.0000001, that's not worth much. But in 2-3 years, as those decimal places get closer to an integer, a round figure, that's a 100,000% return. Does that help answer the question, Jerry?
Yeah, it does. I was under the impression that the person setting up the transaction is the one that determined the slippage, though, not the person selling. Or
it is.
So,
but if you don't set a high enough slippage, it will say transaction failed.
Okay.
So when I'm buying, I choose what slippage I'm happy with. But if the person selling who created the coin dictates minimum 10% slippage, if I do 5, 6, it'll go failed. When I get to 10, dependent on how liquid the market is, it will then succeed.
Okay.
A little trick, if you're ever doing slippage, don't use integers. Don't put 10. Always put 10.11, 10.22, 10.36. So I've seen things fail at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15% it works. And then if I go and try 10.12, it works. It's a tiny little technique in a lot of these sites that as soon as you use a decimal place, 2 decimal places, the transaction works closer to where it was set at.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, we are at the end. Omar says, thanks. I'm glad that helped, Omar. There was a bit of a question between fees and wallets and stuff. We're going to cover that next time. I think we'll do a little bit more on custody. But we've covered off value, a bit on regulations, a bit on winter, some interest earning. I would love, as quickly as you can, guys, a little round robin on the biggest takeaways. If you can't speak, type it in the box below. But it's always good to make sure we come away from calls with, something that's really made us think. So we're going to go Jerry, Orlo, Louise, Justin, Alan, Omar, and Elaine. So Jerry, what's something that's been a big or a useful thing for you on this call?
I liked, Richard made a lot of good points about, when he was talking earlier, kind of losing my train of thought, but just where we are in the adoption of things. Like I know it seems like we're on a precipice, and I get on calls like this in hopes of, hearing something that's going to help prove that for me, I guess. I don't know. Like, it's been to me, I still feel like I'm in a winter because I'm still hodling and hodling and hodling. I'm a little bit afraid of what's going to happen in the next bear, and I'd rather be on the farm I'm going to buy or on the boat I'm going to buy. Like, I don't want to be like when Richard was talking about the October or so being where we peak out in this bull run. I kind of agree with that. Between October and the end of the year, there's a couple of people I follow that do TA, and there was an analysis. This young long-haired dude, DIY investing, did this thing from the halvings. He took all the halvings, and it was an equal number from the halving to the low as it was from the halving to the high. Within very few degrees of change. Now, he did that for 3 different halvings, right? And within a very short, and each of these blow off tops, call it, happen at the end of the year into, the beginning of the new year. And it's Bitcoin first, and then it's all the alts progressively after that. And then, we're down for a couple of years after that. So that idea of working toward the end of the year, where I either liquidate 50 or 65%, whatever it is I end up doing, like that's my, and it's almost causing me more anxiety knowing how much money I'm going to have and try to figure out what to do with it than not having any money.
And then this is why we promote people to practice selling. Like, if all you've done is hodl, it's a very strange feeling to sell, especially with big numbers. So I feel you, Jerry, there I do.
How many of us looked at Cardano at 3 cents and thought, I'm fucking sick of buying this thing, right? We stand on this mountain of 3 cent Cardano, and now it's $1 or whatever it is. And it's almost scary because you got so freaking much of it, right? So I don't want this winter to be full of snowdrifts for me. Like I need to capitalize at the end of the year. Now,
okay. Jerry, I'm going to have to hold you there. I don't want to take, we try and finish on time as much as we can. Thank you very much, sir. Orlo, if you're able to share your key takeaway, what's been a half for you on this call? And you have to unmute yourself.
Unmute. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much for this call. I've learned a lot. It's what my biggest takeaway, I think, has been just solidifying thoughts that I already had, and kind of it's really good to hear, because you kind of, when you're in this space, it kind of feels like I'm in a vacuum and there's not really anyone to talk to. So it's nice to hear other people's thoughts and how they're looking at these markets, etc. What I think I liked the most was the comparing to the internet, and it's the first time I'd really thought of it from that perspective. And it is interesting to see, like, before the internet, people would have been completely fine with the Dewey Decimal System in a library, right? And they wouldn't have seen any problems with that whole idea. But now that we have the internet, the Dewey Decimal System seems completely antiquated. And I feel that we're kind of in the same spot, except it's with banking. It's with the way that money is moving, and with Ethereum, like an entirely new branch of property, right? So it's super interesting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Orlo. Louise, what's your key takeaway from this call?
I think it's good to be back on, because I've not been able to make the last couple because of the times of them. But like I know a couple of people, only a select few people who have got crypto, and they're all quite new to it as well. I think that they all got in around the same time as me, and theirs have gone down, and they're kind of like, oh, it's not looking good. And I'm trying to tell them that, look at the longer term, it will go up overall. Trying to convince myself of that at the same time. But I think it was quite reassuring, like you saying, about even the bear market in 2022, 2023 will still be probably more than what it is now. And obviously, it's going to fluctuate over time. You're going to have bear markets and bull markets. And I think it's like the housing market, isn't it? It goes down, it goes up, it has booms. But then overall, if you look at it in the last kind of 100 years, it's just gone up.
Yeah.
Overall, it might go down, it might fluctuate in the short term, but in the long run, it just continues to rise. And I think it was reassuring to hear that from people who've been investing in crypto a lot longer.
Yeah, it's good. And it's really important to remember that, because you come from a property perspective. This is more diversification for you, isn't it? Yeah. So just remember that, like, if you wait 10 years with a house, you pretty much made money. Like, it's hard not to. There's some exceptions. Crypto, you take a long-term view on crypto, 3 to 5 years. Every cycle, 3 to 5 years of crypto, every full cycle is 100x. 10x or 100x, Richard? I can't remember. One full cycle.
Well, no, over time, it's 200% a year, isn't it? If you follow the median line, say with the Bitcoin, for example. But is that what the question was? I missed it.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I just wanted the over the compounded over the 4 years. I can't remember if it adds 1 0 or 2 zeros.
Well, if you look at it, I mean, if you bought at the top at 17, 18 grand last bull cycle, you're in profit now, right? So if you kind of, even if all else fails, and you bought at the top, wait 4 years. If you can take a long-term view, you can ride that out, and you learn in the meantime about how the cycles work and what to do. You're going to be in profit again. So you take that, right? So.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Louise. We're going to come over to Justin. Just unmute you, Justin. Cool. What's your key takeaway, dude?
Yeah, thanks for the great information. Really appreciated learning about the use cases, the idea of tokenization, splitting up large assets into smaller chunks is especially interesting, and I can see how that would be, an appealing concept. And we're seeing all things. When you gave that example, it kind of reminded me of like what has happened with like Airbnb, which basically disrupted the travel market and now is just as popular as staying at a hotel, but basically fractionalizing, people's usage of a vacation home, but in a better way than timeshares did. So I can see how that concept could really, be applied to a lot of other things, yachts or other large assets or things like that. So that kind of helps me understand it a little bit better. I definitely want to learn more about some of these different income strategies that you mentioned. So love to follow up with you about that or explore it on future calls. Just happy to be learning more. My own viewpoint on cryptos would be to maybe buy small chunks and allocate a portion of my portfolio to them over time, and kind of hold them. Yeah,
cool. Thank you very much for that, Justin.
What I got out of it. Yeah.
Cheers for coming on the call. And what you just said at the end, then, if you dollar cost averaging into crypto, time and time again, every study has shown if you can consistently buy into crypto the same day, week, month, whatever you choose, you will outperform a person who times the market perfectly. So whenever they've looked at this and they've used avatars and they've used people that have been trading for like a full cycle, and then you take the maths on, pick any time frame, but same amount of time, 4 years, 3 years, and you buy every week, month, day, whatever, they do better than a person who trades. So if you can consistently do that, no energy, no thought needed. Mondays, 2 o'clock, I spend $100. You'll do really, really well on that.
And to do it in the best.
Is there a way to set that up automatically through any of the platforms that we?
Yeah, plenty. Like as an American, though, this depends on whether you wish to do your income through KYC or not, which is a bigger thing. That means sharing who you are, but there definitely are platforms to automate this for you. Yes. But let's cover that on another call, because I'm just really conscious of time at the minute. I want to make sure I just capture Alan and Elaine if you want to put anything in the chat. Alan, thank you very much, Justin. Alan, what's your key takeaway?
Plan, prepare. So prepare for regulation, practice exit strategies, diversify into a number of different platforms with a number of different coins in each platform. And other than that, I think be patient and take the long-term view. And that's where I'm at. And thank you.
Well, knowing you a little bit, Alan, I know that fundamentally you have a lot of patience. So, so I think you're good on that point, but all really, really good points. I can't reiterate enough. Richard drilled this home for me. Practice exiting. Practice thinking about exiting. Like when we had to sell recently this year, we had a particular portfolio and we sold. And it's the biggest portfolio I'd sold at the time. It was hard. All I got to do is click a few buttons. But I tell you that the emotions I went through with it having only held for 4 years was very interesting. Very interesting. So practice, and practice your off ramps. If like Elaine's put in the chat there, if regulation is coming, you need to check your exit strategy. And are you going to exit to stable coins? Are you going to exit all the way to the bank? Because if you're going to go all the way to the bank and your bank suddenly receives $50,000 or $100,000 from a random crypto exchange, and your bank account is not used to receiving $100,000, I would put money on the fact your account will get frozen. And then you're going to have to prove that money was yours. And that's hard to do sometimes in crypto, unless you've been tracking it all.
Especially if you don't have KYC on where it's come from.
Even more so, that account's mine. Can you prove it? No, not really. You know, this is why I don't like banks. So I keep things very separate. I do it just to make things easier, not to obscurate or anything like that. But it's just, from my perspective, it's a lot more simpler because I've got less things I have to concern myself or worry myself with. Okay, so we're 15 minutes over.
One other takeaway as well. One of the takeaway, if I can just mention, because of everything you were talking about, despite all the what seemingly negative stuff like the regulation and the coming bear market, winter, whatever you want to call it, be patient and dream big. It was like, I don't know, you've rekindled this belief somehow, even talking about this seemingly negative stuff. So dream big is the other takeaway. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. Just remember that regulation is positive. Okay, even though it can feel a bit shitty and painful, and I've got mixed feelings on the privacy side of it, an unregulated market is never going to be that big because you need the regulation to allow the world to move and to play. You need some regulation. Too much regulation stifles innovation and creativity. No regulation. I can't stand to see people get ripped off. It's one thing it's why we don't post certain things in our FLT group, because there comes a point where the risk and the bad actors, there's so many more of them. So we kind of draw a line here. But regulation will help with some of that. So don't see regulation as negative. See it more as a necessity, because it takes a lot to learn crypto. And I still know like this much after 5 years of so much more stuff within it. So it's not that it's negative, it's just change. And quite often change can feel negative, but think about how many less people will get ripped off, scammed, and all these different things. That's good, because some people put their money into crypto, they put too much in, and they're not in a supportive community. And that's why on our 9-step process that we created, the step 1 is, why are you here? Why are you here? Because if you can't answer that question, the answer to that question changes your path forward fully. But let's leave it at that. Thank you everyone for your comments and thoughts. Richard, is there anything you want to just leave people with before I wrap it up?
I was just going to say exactly the same thing. I mean, you can talk about all the different tokenization, you can talk about the use cases, the utility, all the FUD and all the things in the world, but you're in this space for a reason. And I think it's understanding why that is so fundamental. And everyone is scared about exiting and trying to time it right and get it right and all these different things. You don't have to exit everything. You're never going to get it right, but you just need to understand, what do I need for a period of time that is the time for you? And that should tell you what you need to exit, because you can hold on to it and you'll still have loads and loads of gains in 4 years time, when the whole cycle starts again, basically. So that to me is what you need to keep coming back to. You don't need to sell everything if you don't want to. You could do, but it's that what do you need? Jerry might want a boat, want a farm, you want an income for a year to go and explore, be an artist, whatever it might be. That's the fundamental thing that the question you need to ask is like, what do I need to do this for? Because it makes the answer much more simple for you. You don't need to think about everything. You just need to think about this point if you understand why you're doing it and what it could possibly, what your portfolio could possibly do for you if that's why you're into it. So that's just what I wanted to finish on.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry, for that question as well there. Thanks, Richard. That's really, really good. And it's always about why, isn't it? Like, if you can't know why you're doing something, you can't really make the steps forward. So it's good to think about it. But let's leave it there for today. Really big thanks to everyone that shows up every single week. Really big thanks to the new people. Thanks for people that trust us, from myself and from Richard. I hope this call has been useful, and you can just start to rekindle those feelings of why this is one of the greatest transferences of wealth we have ever seen. So the more that we can do it together in a strong community and help and support each other, we exist for crypto adoption, because we really see it as the future of where things are going. So I hope that has become clear in this call. Hope everyone is good and has a good day wherever you are in the world. And for myself and for Richard, take care. Goodbye, everyone.
Peace. Bye.
Thank you.